Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey that will twist your perception of history, pulling you not just through dusty archives, but through the very fabric of time itself. Imagine the scent of parchment, the whisper of ancient secrets, the thrill of uncovering something utterly impossible. You might think you're safe tucked in your bed, but trust me, some stories have a way of reaching out. You probably won't survive this journey without a few lingering questions keeping you up at night, and maybe a sudden urge to check the date on your phone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself, quite unexpectedly, drawn into the hushed, almost reverent stillness of the Curious Cache, an antique shop that defies easy categorization. It's not one of those trendy, curated spots with minimalist displays and artisanal coffee. Oh no, this place is a labyrinth of forgotten things, a glorious, chaotic testament to the passage of time. The air itself feels thick with history, smelling faintly of beeswax, decaying paper, and a certain undefinable mustiness that only comes from generations of accumulated objects. Dust motes dance in the narrow shafts of sunlight that pierce the gloom, illuminating forgotten curios and silent, watchful furniture. You're not really looking for anything in particular, just browsing, letting your fingers drift over the spines of neglected books, the cool surfaces of ceramic figurines, the tarnished silver of forgotten tea sets. It's a slow, meditative process, a treasure hunt without a map. You round a towering stack of Victorian-era hatboxes, probably containing more dust than actual hats, and find yourself in a dimly lit alcove. Here, tucked away on a lower shelf, behind a chipped porcelain doll with an unervingly wide stare and a stack of yellowed sheet music, your gaze snagging on something that just doesn't quite fit. It's a book, or at least it looks like a book, but not like any book you've ever seen. Its cover, a deep, almost charcoal brown, is clearly leather, but it feels different under your fingertips, thicker, almost petrified, with a texture like ancient, sun-baked earth. It's not smooth, not supple, but rugged, bearing the scars of untold centuries. The edges are worn, softened by time and handling, yet the core material feels incredibly resilient, almost defying its apparent age. You gently pull it from its resting place, dislodging a small cloud of dust that shimmers in the faint light. It rests heavy in your hands, surprisingly so for its modest size, perhaps 8 inches by 5, and maybe 2 inches thick. The binding isn't what you'd expect from a standard book. Instead of a modern glued or stitched spine, there are visible cords, thick and dark, woven through the leather, securing the pages within. And then there are the clasps, 2 of them, made of a dark, almost black metal, intricately designed with symbols you can't quite decipher. They're not simple buckles. They're more like miniature, ornate locks, their mechanisms hidden deep within the metal. You try to open them, your thumb pressing against the worn surface, but they hold fast, stubbornly refusing to yield. It's like trying to open a pickle jar after leg day, but with more historical significance and far more intrigue. You find yourself almost whispering, "Come on, just a peek," as if coaxing a shy, ancient creature. The air around you seems to grow stiller, as if the entire shop is holding its breath. You notice a faint, almost imperceptible scent emanating from the journal itself, not just the generic dust and mildew aroma of old books, but something deeper, more organic, like dried herbs and a whisper of wood smoke. It's a bouquet of forgotten lives, dust mites, and probably a dash of regret from whoever lost it. You persist with the clasps, your fingers tracing the strange symbols, until, with a faint click that seems to echo disproportionately loudly in the quiet shop, one finally gives way. Then the other, success. It's a small victory, but it feels monumental. You carefully, almost reverently, open the cover. The first thing you notice is the pages. They're not paper as you know it. They are thin, incredibly smooth, and possess a subtle translucence, unlike anything you've ever felt. It's not parchment, which is typically thicker and more opaque. nor papyrus, which often feels fibrous and brittle. Historians still debate the exact composition of some ancient writing materials, especially those found in unusual conditions, but this feels different. It's almost like a very fine, almost silken leather, treated to an incredible degree of thinness and flexibility. You wonder if this is some lost technique, a secret of ancient scribes. And then the writing. It's not English, obviously. It's not even Latin, at least not in any familiar form. The script is elegant, flowing, yet distinctively angular in places, a beautiful dance of curves and sharp lines. It looks somewhat Roman, yes, like an old Latin script you might see on a monument or an ancient scroll, but there are odd characters, symbols that seem to defy any known alphabet, interspersed within the familiar-looking letters. It's like someone decided to invent a few new letters just for fun, or perhaps out of necessity. You trace a finger over a particularly intricate symbol, a swirling knot that seems to pulse with a quiet energy, and a shiver runs down your spine. You flip through a few pages, the material rustling with a soft, dry whisper. Each page is filled with this intricate script, sometimes accompanied by small, detailed sketches, a profile of a face, a depiction of what looks like a building, a strange star chart. The ink, a deep, rich sepia, appears remarkably vibrant, as if it were laid down only yesterday, defying the apparent age of the journal. There are no smudges, no signs of fading, just crisp, clear lines. This isn't just old. It's impossibly preserved. You notice something else, something that makes your breath catch in your throat. On one page, a small, almost imperceptible watermark, or perhaps a stamp in the corner. It's a symbol you recognize or think you do from textbooks and documentaries about ancient Rome. The SPQR insignia, the Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. A mainstream historical fact you learned years ago, now staring back at you from a page that feels utterly alien. But then, right next to it, almost hidden in the swirl of the script, is another symbol. It looks like a stylized double helix, or perhaps a very abstract representation of gears meshing together. It's utterly anachronistic, something that simply should not exist in ancient Rome. It's like finding a QR code etched onto a Neolithic arrowhead. A quirky tidbit flashes through your mind. The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device that was essentially an analog computer, far more advanced than anything historians thought possible for its era. This journal, however, feels even more out of place. It suggests a knowledge, a technology, that simply shouldn't align with the Roman Empire. You scan the pages again, a growing sense of awe mixing with a prickle of unease. The writing is clearly a personal account, a diary, judging by the format and the occasional dates, though the dating system itself is baffling. It's not the Roman calendar you're familiar with, nor any other historical calendar you can readily identify. It's a jumble of numbers and what seem to be astrological symbols. This isn't just an ancient artifact. It's an anomaly. It's a riddle wrapped in an enigma, bound in impossible leather. The journal feels alive almost. It hums with a silent energy, a quiet insistence that its story be told. You realize with a sudden, profound certainty that you haven't just stumbled upon an old book. You've found a voice from a place and time that shouldn't be possible, a secret whispered across the ages, waiting for someone to finally listen. And you, it seems, are that someone. You carefully, almost reverently, turn the brittle, yellowed pages of the journal. The leather cover, surprisingly intact despite its obvious age, creaks a soft protest, a sound that whispers of forgotten centuries. Dust motes dance in the ambient light, disturbed by your gentle touch, as if awakening tiny spirits of the past. You lean closer, the faint, earthy scent of ancient paper and something indefinably metallic filling your nostrils. It's the smell of untold stories, of secrets preserved by time itself. Your fingers trace the elegant, looping script, Latin, undoubtedly, but with a peculiar crispness to the ink, as if it were written yesterday, not millennia ago. The initial entries are, at first glance, deceptively mundane. Observations about the weather, the cost of bread, a brief mention of a local senator's speech. You almost breathe a sigh of relief, thinking, a perfectly ordinary historical document, but then a flicker, a phrase that seems off, like a single out-of-tune note in a perfectly composed symphony. The author, writing about the sweltering Roman summer, laments not just the heat, but the oppressive humidity that made the air feel like a damp blanket, clinging to every fiber, as if the very atoms of water were conspiring against comfort. Atoms? Now, that's an interesting choice of words for someone living in, say, 70 AD. You pause, your brow furrowing just slightly. A curious turn of phrase, perhaps? A poetic flourish? You dismiss it for a moment, attributing it to translation nuances or an unusually scientific mind for the era. But as you continue, the peculiar observations multiply, like ripples spreading across a pond. The diarist describes the stench of the Roman streets, not with simple disgust, but with a clinical analysis of putrefaction and anaerobic decomposition. They then lament the lack of proper sanitation systems to prevent the spread of unseen agents of disease. Unseen agents? You find yourself gently shaking your head. This isn't just advanced vocabulary. It's an understanding of microbiology centuries before anyone even conceived of a microscope. It's like reading a text written by a modern epidemiologist, but somehow it's bound in ancient parchment. The next entry you encounter describes a visit to the public baths, a central pillar of Roman social life. This mainstream historical fact often highlights the Romans' ingenuity in engineering and community. The author details the grandeur of the architecture, the sheer scale of the pools, the intricate hypocaust system heating the floors. Yet, there's an underlying sense of profound discomfort. You read about their struggle to find a clean public latrine, and you can almost hear their internal monologue. Oh, for the love of all that is holy, where is the flush? And why are we all sharing a sponge on a stick? You chuckle softly, imagining their horror. The diarist then goes on to describe the communal sponge on a stick with a level of scientific revulsion that transcends mere squeamishness, implying a deep understanding of bacterial transmission. Their observations on Roman society are equally telling. They describe the bustling Roman Forum, a vibrant, chaotic heart of public life, where merchants hawked their wares, senators debated, and citizens gossiped, all under the watchful eyes of temples dedicated to gods like Jupiter and Venus. But their perspective isn't one of a native. It's that of an anthropologist, observing a foreign culture with detached fascination. They note the stark social stratification, the casual brutality of slavery, and the pervasive superstitions with a peculiar blend of incredulity and analytical distance. For instance, they complain about a particularly annoying incident where a soothsayer interpreted a sneeze as an omen of bad luck, causing an entire street to clear out. This quirky or fringe tidbit of Roman life is presented with a palpable sense of the diarist's thinking. Really? A sneeze? It's not just a cultural difference. It's a clash of worldviews. The technological frustrations of the diarist become increasingly evident. You find a particularly exasperated entry about Roman timekeeping. The sundial tells me it's about midday, which means it could be anything from 2 hours ago to 2 hours from now. If I had a denarius for every time I was late to an appointment because of this temporal ambiguity, I'd be richer than Crassus. You can almost feel their modern-day frustration, like someone stuck in traffic without GPS, only worse because the concept of GPS doesn't even exist. They detail their constant struggle with the inefficiency of manual labor for tasks we now complete with a flick of a switch or a few keystrokes. Imagine trying to explain electricity or the internet to someone whose brightest light source is an oil lamp or whose fastest message travels by horse. You can practically feel their internal scream. And then there are the subtle, almost imperceptible hints of future knowledge. The diarist observes the political maneuvering around a certain ambitious general, noting with an almost chilling detachment how such unchecked ambition invariably leads to chaos, and empires, however grand, are but temporary constructs. It's not a prediction, not exactly, but an observation steeped in the wisdom of hindsight, a wisdom no Roman of that era could possibly possess. They discuss the grain supply with an understanding of complex logistics and global trade networks that were millennia away from existing. You can almost see them mentally calculating supply chains that wouldn't be invented for another 1,800 years. There's an entry where they try, in vain, to explain a modern concept to a Roman counterpart. They mention trying to explain the concept of remote work to a Roman artisan, and you can almost hear the crickets chirping in the silence that followed. But, you are not here? How do you hammer the metal from there? You can almost picture the artisan's confused, slightly fearful stare, probably thinking, is this person possessed by Mercury, the god of messages? This kind of interaction isn't just a language barrier, it's a conceptual chasm. The entries become more reflective, the author constantly comparing their new reality to an unspoken, yet clearly superior, world they left behind. Their philosophical musings hint at a post-Enlightenment understanding of human rights, individual liberty, and scientific method, concepts utterly alien to the ancient world. They critique Roman legal practices not just as harsh, but as fundamentally lacking in due process and universal application, a perspective that resonates deeply with modern judicial principles. Historians still argue whether Roman law was truly progressive for its time or merely a tool of imperial control, but this diarist leaves no doubt about their critical assessment, finding it archaic by their own invisible standards. The cumulative effect of these anachronisms is undeniable. The initial flicker of doubt has grown into a roaring inferno of certainty. This isn't just an eccentric Roman with an unusual turn of phrase. This isn't a scholar ahead of their time. This is someone who doesn't belong here. Their perspective, their knowledge, their very way of thinking is fundamentally, impossibly not of ancient Rome. You feel a shiver tracing its way down your spine, not of cold, but of profound, exhilarating realization. You are holding a journal penned by someone who has traversed the impossible, a true anomaly, a traveler from another temporal epoch. The question isn't if they're from the future, but how they got here. You find yourself, or rather, the time traveler finds themselves, not drifting gently into a new era like a leaf on a lazy river, but plummeting headfirst into it, a splashdown without the water. One moment, they're in a quiet, climate-controlled library, the scent of old paper and dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. The next, it's a jarring, visceral lurch, a sensation like being squeezed through a very small, very loud keyhole. The world spins, not metaphorically, but truly, a kaleidoscope of browns, ochres, and flashes of scarlet, before slamming to an abrupt halt. They aren't standing, they're sprawling, unceremoniously dumped onto what feels like a cobbled street, the rough stones digging into their palms through the thin fabric of their modern clothes. The first thing that hits you, even before your eyes manage to focus, is the noise. It's an absolute wall of sound, a cacophony that makes your eardrums throb. Imagine every single person in your busiest city center, all shouting at once, combined with a livestock market, a construction site, and a very enthusiastic brass band that's slightly out of tune. You hear the rhythmic clatter of hooves on stone, the creak and groan of wooden cartwheels, a sound so distinct it's almost musical in its complaint. There are vendors hawking their wares in booming, guttural Latin, their voices cutting through the din like blunt knives. Children are shrieking, dogs are barking, and somewhere, a donkey lets out a bray that sounds less like an animal and more like a rusty door hinge slowly dying. It's overwhelming, a raw, unfiltered symphony of human and animal life, so unlike the measured, filtered sounds of the modern world. You instinctively clap your hands over your ears, a futile gesture against the sheer volume of it all. Then comes the smell. Oh, the smells. It's a sensory assault, a complex, layered perfume of ancient Rome that your modern nose simply isn't equipped to process. The first wave is undeniably, overwhelmingly animal. Horse sweat, donkey dung, the musky scent of sheep being herded down the street. It's mingled with the sharp, acidic tang of human waste, a constant, low hum in the air that reminds you just how primitive sanitation was. Interspersed with this is the earthy smell of damp soil, the acrid bite of wood smoke from countless cooking fires, and the sweet, cloying perfume of cheap incense wafting from a nearby temple. But then, as your senses try to compartmentalize, you pick out other notes. The rich, yeasty aroma of freshly baked bread from an unseen bakery, the metallic tang of blood from a butcher's stall, and a pungent, fishy odor that seems to permeate everything. This, you quickly learn, is the omnipresent garum, a fermented fish sauce that Romans put on practically everything. It's their ketchup, their soy sauce, their secret ingredient for a truly authentic ancient Roman experience. And let me tell you, it smells exactly like what it is. Old, fermented fish. Perhaps not the most appetizing thought when you've just been violently deposited into a new reality. As your eyes finally manage to clear the visual static, the sight of it all snaps into brutal, vibrant focus. You're lying on the edge of a narrow, bustling street, packed shoulder to shoulder with people. The sheer density of humanity is staggering. Togas, once a distant historical costume, are everywhere, draped over figures of all shapes and sizes. You see the pristine white of a senator's toga, stark against the dusty street, and the stained, patched garments of a common laborer. Tunics in various shades of brown, gray, and undyed wool are the norm, though flashes of crimson, deep blue, and saffron yellow stand out. You notice the footwear, simple sandals, some sturdy, some delicate, all incredibly dusty. The architecture is a dizzying mix of grand and grimy. Towering multi-story insulae apartment buildings loom precariously overhead, their upper floors looking like they might shed a brick or two at any moment. Below them, shops spill out onto the street, their wooden shutters open to reveal dark interiors. There are no neat sidewalks here, just the uneven, worn cobblestones that are shared by pedestrians, carts, and animals alike. You have to constantly be on guard, lest you become intimately acquainted with the underside of a donkey cart. It's a bit like trying to cross Times Square during rush hour, but with actual donkeys and no traffic lights. The faces are a blur, a kaleidoscope of expressions, haggard, joyful, stern, curious. You see dark, intense eyes, sun-weathered skin, and an array of hairstyles, from neatly coiffed curls to wild, untamed locks. A group of heavily armed legionaries, their bronze helmets glinting in the harsh sunlight, stride past with an air of practiced authority, their hobnailed boots clanking rhythmically on the stones. They look formidable, and you instinctively try to make yourself smaller, less noticeable. This is, after all, a world where a wrong glance could lead to a very bad day. You try to push yourself up, your muscles protesting, and a sudden wave of dizziness washes over you. A nearby vendor, squatting beside a basket of what looks suspiciously like very old, very bruised apples, eyes you with a mixture of suspicion and vague amusement. You manage to scramble to your feet, feeling clumsy and conspicuous in your strange, anachronistic clothing. A simple t-shirt and jeans, so utterly out of place it's almost comical. You quickly realize your modern footwear, while comfortable, is far too clean for these streets, marking you as an outsider immediately. This isn't a theme park. There are no costumed actors here. This is real, and you are spectacularly unprepared. The heat is another oppressive layer. The sun beats down with relentless intensity, reflecting off the pale stone and dusty ground. There's no air conditioning, no refreshing breeze, just the stagnant, humid air thick with the smells of the city. You feel sweat trickling down your back, and your throat is suddenly parched. You yearn for a cold bottle of water, a luxury that seems impossibly far away. As you tentatively take your first few steps, you notice the details. The graffiti scrawled on walls, some crude, some surprisingly artistic, advertising gladiatorial games or political candidates. It's a fascinating glimpse into the everyday concerns of the Roman populace, a public bulletin board of ancient desires and grievances. Historians still argue whether some of the more elaborate graffiti was commissioned art or simply very talented amateur defacement. You also spot the public fountains, their spouts gushing water continuously, a testament to the engineering marvel of the Roman aqueducts. These impressive structures brought fresh water from miles away, ensuring that even the common citizen had access to clean drinking water, a feat many later civilizations struggled to replicate. A group of boys, no older than 10 or 12, chase a wooden hoop down the street, their laughter bright and clear amidst the din. They dodge pedestrians with an agility born of constant practice, their bare feet slapping against the cobblestones. One of them nearly collides with you, stopping just short with a wide-eyed stare before rejoining his friends, leaving you feeling even more alien. It's a reminder that beneath the grandiosity of empire and the harshness of daily life, there are still moments of simple, universal joy. You notice a peculiar feature on the street: deep ruts carved into the stone, seemingly by countless cartwheels. These grooves, you realize, are essentially ancient Roman lanes, guiding traffic, though they also make walking a bit of a hazard if you're not careful. It's a testament to the sheer volume of trade and transport that flowed through these urban arteries. You also catch sight of a public latrine, an open-air affair where Romans socialized while doing their business. Yes, you heard that right. They sat side by side on long benches with holes, often sharing a communal sponge on a stick for wiping. It's a truly humbling thought for anyone used to the privacy of a modern bathroom. You can almost smell it from here, and you quickly avert your gaze, deciding that particular cultural immersion can wait. The sheer press of bodies is constant. You are jostled, bumped, and nudged from all sides. Personal space, as you know it, simply doesn't exist here. It's a constant dance of avoidance and reluctant contact. It's a bit like being trapped in the middle of a mosh pit, but everyone is wearing tunics and trying to buy fish. You keep your hands close, instinctively protecting your pockets, though you quickly realize you have nothing of value to a Roman anyway. Your phone, your wallet, your keys, they're just strange, useless trinkets here. This initial arrival is not a gentle introduction. It's a baptism by fire, a full-body immersion into a world that is simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Every sense is assaulted, every expectation challenged. The time traveler, and by extension, you are not just observing history. You are in it, breathing its air, feeling its dust, enduring its chaos. And the immediate, overwhelming thought isn't about grand historical events or philosophical debates, but simply, how in the name of Jupiter am I going to survive this? The abruptness of your arrival into ancient Rome has, surprisingly, given way to a strange rhythm. You find yourself quickly adapting, or at least pretending to adapt, to the relentless cadence of Roman daily life, observing every meticulous detail through eyes that still, occasionally, betray a flicker of disbelief. You wake with the sun, or more accurately, with the city. There's no snooze button here, no gentle alarm clock. Instead, the first tendrils of dawn are accompanied by a symphony of awakening Rome. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of a cart over cobblestones, the insistent braying of a donkey, and the shouts of vendors already setting up their stalls. Your bedding, a surprisingly coarse wool blanket on a simple cot, feels a world away from your memory of memory foam. But the chill of the pre-dawn air soon has you scrambling from its embrace. Morning rituals are Spartan, to say the least. Forget your refreshing morning shower. You're more likely to find yourself heading to a public bathhouse, even at this early hour, if you're lucky enough to have access. The air inside is thick with steam and the scent of human bodies, a mix of sweat, olive oil, and sometimes surprisingly pleasant herbal fragrances. There's no privacy, of course. You navigate a labyrinth of hot, warm, and cold plunge pools, scraping your skin with a strigil to remove dirt and oil, a practice that initially felt utterly barbaric. You quickly learn to appreciate the communal aspect, though, the easy chatter and the sense of shared humanity that transcends the centuries. It's here you realize that despite the vast technological chasm, the simple need for cleanliness and social interaction remains constant. You might even catch a Roman practicing their oratorical skills, shouting into the echoing chamber, completely oblivious to how utterly ridiculous they look, like a particularly enthusiastic karaoke singer at 7 a.m. Back in your humble lodging, you dress in the practical tunic, a simple garment that feels liberating after the constricting clothes of your own time. If you're a citizen, a toga might be draped over it, a cumbersome and surprisingly heavy piece of fabric that takes practice to wear with any semblance of grace. You've seen many a Roman trip over their own hems, a small comfort when you inevitably feel like you're wrestling a bedsheet. Breakfast is a quick affair, often just bread, perhaps dipped in wine, or a handful of olives and dried fruit. No elaborate lattes or avocado toast here, just sustenance to get you through the morning. The lack of caffeine is a particular shock to your system, leaving you feeling perpetually a step behind the Romans' boundless energy. As the sun climbs higher, the city truly erupts. You step out into the streets, and it's like being plunged into a living, breathing, incredibly loud organism. The narrow, winding lanes are a chaotic ballet of humanity, animals, and commerce. Hawkers shout their wares, their voices echoing off the multi-story insulae. The Roman apartment buildings that loom overhead, sometimes dangerously, you note with a slight shudder. Carts laden with goods trundle past, pulled by straining oxen or donkeys, their drivers yelling warnings to pedestrians who scatter like pigeons. The sheer volume of people is staggering. Rome, you quickly learn, is a metropolis of over 1 million souls, a truly massive city for its time. The marketplace, often the forum itself or one of the many specialized markets, is a kaleidoscope of sensory overload. The air is thick with 1,000 competing smells. The earthy aroma of fresh produce, the pungent tang of exotic spices from across the empire, the sweet scent of baking bread wafting from a nearby pastrinum, and, inevitably, the less pleasant odors of refuse and unwashed bodies. You see mountains of olives, baskets overflowing with figs and grapes, and stalls piled high with amphorae of wine and olive oil. Fishmongers loudly proclaim the freshness of their catch, despite the distinct aroma that tells a different story. You wonder how many times you've subtly wrinkled your nose, trying to appear nonchalant while your modern sensibilities scream. The sounds are just as overwhelming. The clamor of haggling, the bleating of sheep, the excited chatter of gossiping women, the rhythmic hammering of a metalworker, and the occasional blast of a trumpeter announcing a public notice. It's a symphony of commerce and daily life, a constant, buzzing hum that vibrates through the very ground beneath your feet. You watch as Romans haggle with fierce determination over prices, a skill you're slowly trying to master. "Too much, citizen," you hear repeatedly, followed by elaborate gestures and expressions of mock offense. It's a theatrical performance, played out daily across countless stalls. You even spot a street vendor selling what looks suspiciously like early Roman fast food, perhaps a hot sausage or a pastry, served from a portable brazier. Historians still argue whether these street foods were a staple for the poor or a convenient snack for everyone on the go. But one thing is certain: they were everywhere. Amidst the chaos, you notice the details. A child chasing a stray dog, a group of men gathered around a board game, a poet reciting verses for a small crowd, hoping for a few coins. You learn to navigate the throngs, to anticipate the sudden swerve of a cart or the lurch of a jostling shoulder. It's a dance, a constant negotiation of space and intent. You can't help but marvel at the efficiency of it all, despite the apparent disorder. Goods flow, money changes hands, and the city thrives on this vibrant, untamed energy. It makes your modern, sterile supermarkets seem almost boring, though you do miss the air conditioning and the lack of open sewage. Just a little. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the city's energy shifts. The frenetic pace of the day gives way to the more relaxed, yet still vibrant atmosphere of the Roman evening. The streets, though still busy, are now filled with people heading to the baths for an evening soak, or making their way to social gatherings. The smell of cooking fires begins to permeate the air, replacing the market's cacophony with the promise of food and fellowship. Evening banquets are where the Romans truly come alive, a far cry from your quiet takeout nights. If you're fortunate enough to be invited to a cena, a formal dinner, you're in for an experience that blends culinary indulgence with social performance. You recline on low couches, typically 3 to a couch, arranged around a central table. It's an odd posture for eating, you admit, feeling a bit like a lazy house cat, but you quickly learn to adapt. The first few times, you nearly tumble off trying to reach for something. The host, often a wealthy patron or a senator, presides over the meal, ensuring the flow of food, wine, and conversation. The food itself is a revelation. Forget the bland image you might have had. Roman cuisine is rich, varied, and often surprisingly exotic. Courses arrive one after another. Appetizers of olives, eggs, and salads. Then roasted meats like pork, lamb, or even dormice. Yes, really a Roman delicacy, though you try to politely decline that particular offering with a forced smile. And finally, fruits and honeyed desserts. The flavors are bold, often incorporating garum, a fermented fish sauce that is omnipresent and surprisingly versatile, if you can get past the initial aroma. It's their equivalent of ketchup if ketchup were made from, well, let's not dwell on it. Wine, often diluted with water, flows freely, mixed to taste in large bowls called craters. You learn to gauge the strength by the convivial chatter around you. Conversation at these banquets can range from lighthearted gossip to serious political discussions. You listen intently, absorbing the nuances of Roman social etiquette. There are toasts, recitations of poetry, and sometimes even entertainment dancers, musicians, or storytellers. It's a masterclass in ancient networking, where alliances are forged and reputations subtly enhanced or diminished with every witty remark or carefully veiled insult. You find yourself observing, learning the rhythm of their banter, the subtle cues of power and deference. It's all very sophisticated, a far cry from your typical potluck, and a stark reminder that even without screens, humans have always found ways to connect, entertain, and occasionally overeat. As the evening wanes and the oil lamps begin to sputter, you feel the comfortable weight of a full stomach and a mind buzzing with new observations. You've witnessed a day in the life of ancient Rome, from the harsh awakening to the convivial close, a tapestry woven with threads of the familiar and the utterly alien. And you realize, with a strange mix of awe and trepidation, that this is your new normal. For now, you continue to pore over the diary, the ink bleeding ever so slightly into the aged parchment, and the next entries pull you deeper into the intricate, often baffling social tapestry of ancient Rome. It's one thing to witness the city's chaotic beauty, but quite another to navigate its human currents, a dizzying dance of power, servitude, and everyday struggle. The author, our intrepid traveler, quickly learns that merely being in Rome isn't enough. You have to understand its invisible rules, its unspoken hierarchies, or risk everything. Your first encounters with Roman society, as chronicled in these pages, are often with its highest echelons, the senators. You catch glimpses of them, not just in the forum or the Senate House, but even on the street, moving like stately ships through a choppy sea of commoners. Imagine the scene. A man, often older, with a gravitas that seems to precede him, draped in a toga so pristine and voluminous it looks like it could have its own zip code. His retinue, usually a mix of freedmen, clients, and even lictors bearing their fasces, carves a path through the throng. The diary details the immediate, almost instinctual deference shown to them, the hushed whispers, the quick bows, the parting of the crowds. It's like watching a real-life red carpet event, but instead of paparazzi, you have citizens desperate for a nod, a word, anything that might signify patronage. Our traveler, armed with modern sensibilities, grapples with this overt display of power. You read about their internal struggle to maintain a straight face when faced with the sheer theatricality of it all. Seriously, one entry muses. How did they manage to get anything done in those things? One wrong move and you're tripping over a yard of wool, probably face-planting right into a pile of donkey dung. And the dry cleaning bill? Don't even get me started. It's a gentle jab, but it highlights the alien nature of Roman high society. The diary notes how senators' homes often stood as fortresses of influence, where clients would gather at dawn for the salutatio, vying for a moment of their patron's attention, hoping for a handout, legal advice, or just a good word. This patron-client system, a mainstream historical fact, was the very bedrock of Roman social interaction, binding rich and poor, powerful and powerless, in a complex web of mutual obligation. Our traveler quickly grasps that mastering this system, or at least understanding it, is key to survival. You learn to observe, to mimic the subtle gestures of respect, to know when to fade into the background and when a well-placed, deferential nod might save you from unwanted scrutiny. Then, the diary shifts focus, pulling you down from the lofty heights of the aristocracy to the bustling, gritty reality of the everyday plebeian. This is where our traveler spends most of their time trying to blend in, to become just another face in the Roman crowd. You read about the cacophony of the markets, the shouts of vendors hawking everything from fresh fish to exotic spices, the clatter of amphorae, the pungent aroma of garum mingling with sweat and unwashed wool. The plebeians, the common citizens, are the heartbeat of Rome. They live in crowded insulae, multi-story apartment blocks that are often fire hazards, but they spill out onto the streets, making them their living rooms. You witness their simple pleasures. The games of chance played with dice on street corners, the boisterous laughter from a local thermopolium, a Roman fast food joint where, frankly, the hygiene standards might make a modern health inspector faint. Our traveler recounts trying to decipher the rapid-fire Latin slang, the local jokes, and the everyday gossip. It's here you find a quirky tidbit. The Roman tonsure, or barber, was not just a place for a shave. It was the ultimate gossip hub, where news, rumors, and political whispers were exchanged faster than a courier pigeon. The diary even mentions a particularly chatty barber who, much to the traveler's chagrin, seemed to know everyone's business. It's like he had a direct feed to the Roman equivalent of Twitter, only with more hair clippings and less privacy. The entry quips. You feel the traveler's relief at being among the anonymous masses, yet also the constant tension of needing to act Roman enough without revealing the vast, unbridgeable chasm of their true origin. Historians still debate the true extent of Roman citizens' participation in the political process beyond the elite, and from these pages, you get a sense of both their fervent loyalties and their simmering frustrations. But beneath the senators and amidst the plebeians, the diary starkly illuminates the omnipresent reality of Roman society. Slavery. It's a chilling reminder of the vast moral difference between their time and ours. Slaves are everywhere, performing every conceivable task. You read about house slaves, running entire households with meticulous efficiency. Public slaves maintaining the city's infrastructure. Agricultural slaves toiling in the fields, and even educated slaves serving as tutors, doctors, or scribes. The sheer scale is staggering. Our traveler, from a world where such a concept is abhorrent, struggles deeply with this. The entries reveal a profound sense of discomfort, a quiet horror at the casual brutality and the systematic dehumanization. Yet, to survive, you learn to observe, to not react, to hide your true feelings. You witness moments of surprising tenderness, too, where a slave might share a quiet joke with their master, or where bonds of camaraderie form among those in servitude. The diary recounts a particular interaction with a young slave boy named Marcus, who worked in a local inn. He was quick-witted, with eyes that held a spark of defiance. Our traveler, unable to offer much, would sometimes slip him a piece of bread or a small coin, a silent gesture of shared humanity that transcended their vastly different stations. It's a quiet rebellion against the norms of the time, a risk taken in the shadows. The traveler notes how Marcus, despite his circumstances, possessed a resilience that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. He carried the weight of his world with a grace that shamed my own trivial complaints. One entry reads, a poignant reflection on the human spirit's ability to endure even the most oppressive systems. Navigating this tripartite social structure, the powerful senators, the struggling but vibrant plebeians, and the omnipresent, often invisible, slaves, is a constant tightrope walk for the time traveler. You learn to read faces, to interpret the subtle cues of status and power. You understand that a simple tunic means you're plebeian, a toga means you're a citizen, and a purple stripe on that toga means you're someone of serious import. You learn to speak with deference to those above you, with casual familiarity to your supposed peers, and with an almost forced nonchalance towards those considered beneath you. It's a performance, every single day, and the diary conveys the exhaustion of maintaining such a complex charade. You're always on guard, always aware that one wrong word, one anachronistic gesture, could unravel your carefully constructed identity and expose you to a world that would undoubtedly view you as either a madman or a dangerous sorcerer. The social fabric of Rome isn't just a backdrop. It's a living, breathing entity that demands constant adaptation, a labyrinth where every step is a calculated risk. The world of ancient Rome, you realize, isn't just about bustling markets and grand architecture. It's a living, breathing organism, and its heart beats with the relentless rhythm of power. You begin to sense it, a low thrum beneath the everyday cacophony, a constant hum of ambition and subtle menace. It's like being dropped into a historical reality show, but without the confessional booth and with much higher stakes than who gets the final rose. Your diary entries start to shift, reflecting a growing awareness of the chilling proximity to political machinations. You're not a participant, not yet anyway, but an increasingly keen observer. You find yourself drawn to the forum, not just for the spectacle of daily life, but for the hushed conversations near the rostra, the intense gazes exchanged between men in fine togas, the way a senator's voice could drop to a conspiratorial whisper, even in a crowd. It's a masterclass in nonverbal communication, where a raised eyebrow or a fleeting smirk can speak volumes about alliances shifting or fortunes turning. You start to pick up on the subtle cues. The way certain families always seem to sit together at public games, a quiet display of solidarity. The way a successful general, back from a campaign, would be mobbed by eager supplicants, all vying for a nod, a word, a sliver of his patronage. You learn that before any major vote or campaign, many politicians would consult a haruspex to examine the entrails of sacrificed animals, hoping for a sign from the gods. Talk about a gut feeling influencing policy. It's a quirky tidbit that consistently reminds you just how different their worldview is, even when their political maneuvering feels eerily familiar. You quickly grasp the fierce competition for offices within the cursus honorum, the sequential path of public offices that ambitious young Romans would follow. From quaestor to aedile, praetor, and finally consul, each step was a brutal climb, often funded by vast personal wealth and cemented by intricate networks of patronage. It's a mainstream historical fact that underscores the relentless ambition driving these men. Every handshake, every public appearance, every carefully chosen word, it all serves a purpose. To ascend the ladder, to gain more influence, more power. You watch them, these men who are both utterly alien and strangely recognizable in their hunger. They preen and posture, delivering long, dramatic speeches, their voices echoing off the marble columns of the Senate House. Sometimes you wonder if they just enjoyed the sound of their own voices, a bit like a particularly long-winded podcast where everyone's an expert, but with real-world consequences. The air in the Senate House itself, even from the periphery, feels thick with unspoken words and sharp intentions. You sometimes manage to gain access, perhaps as a scribe for a fleeting moment, or simply by being in the entourage of someone slightly more important. The room is not a place of calm deliberation, but a gladiatorial arena of words. Arguments flare, voices rise and fall, and the rustle of togas against marble seems to carry the weight of empires. You observe how every senator seems to have perfected that thoughtful statesman pose, probably practicing in front of a mirror, much like aspiring influencers today. You start to understand the intricate dance of alliances and rivalries. One day, two senators might be seen sharing a laugh over wine, their families intermarried for generations. The next, their public debate is so venomous you half expect them to draw daggers right there in the forum. It's like a really high-stakes game of musical chairs, but instead of losing a seat, you might lose your head. Fun for the whole family, right? You record instances of outright bribery, thinly veiled threats, and character assassinations that would make modern tabloids blush. The lines between public duty and personal gain are incredibly blurred, if they exist at all. Your diary details the palpable tension during a major senatorial debate over grain distribution, a seemingly mundane topic that quickly escalates into a fierce proxy war between powerful factions. You watch as a respected senator, known for his integrity, is systematically undermined by carefully placed rumors about his financial dealings and even his family's loyalty. The whispers spread like wildfire through the city, fueled by anonymous pamphlets and the gossip of the bathhouses. You see the man's face grow thinner, his shoulders slump. He's not just debating policy. He's fighting for his reputation, his legacy, perhaps even his life. It's a chilling reminder that in Rome, words could be as sharp and deadly as a blade. You also become acutely aware of the emperor's shadow, ever present. While the Senate debates, the emperor makes decrees. While senators jockey for position, the emperor's favor is the ultimate prize. You witness the almost religious reverence some show for the imperial family, contrasted sharply with the bitter resentment simmering beneath the surface in others. Historians still vigorously debate whether the Republic truly fell due to internal corruption and ambition, or if external pressures and the sheer scale of the empire simply made its republican structure unsustainable. But from your vantage point, seeing the daily grind of power, it feels like a slow, inevitable slide fueled by human nature itself. The danger of your proximity becomes a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. You're privy to conversations you shouldn't hear. You see glances that are too knowing. You witness betrayals that are too stark. You realize that even as an observer, you could easily become collateral damage. To know too much, to be seen in the wrong company, to accidentally betray an anachronistic understanding of future events, any of these could be fatal. You begin to develop a hyper-awareness, a sixth sense for shifting loyalties and potential threats. Every casual conversation in a public bath, every murmur at a banquet, every pronouncement in the forum takes on a new, ominous weight. You are witnessing the raw, unfiltered mechanics of power, ambition, and betrayal, and it's both terrifyingly captivating and utterly exhausting. The air around the powerful smells of expensive perfume and the faint, unsettling tang of fear. You wake to the persistent, cloying smell of olive oil lamps, a scent that clings to everything in this ancient world, a far cry from the crisp, instant illumination you're accustomed to. Every morning, you face the same internal groan, the sheer effort of living in ancient Rome. It's not just the grand political maneuvers or the social tightropes you're walking. It's the relentless, grinding reality of pre-industrial technology. Your brain, wired for gigabytes and microchips, constantly struggles to process a world where the most advanced piece of computational technology is, well, an abacus if you're lucky. Consider lighting, for instance. You're used to flicking a switch, banishing shadows with a jolt of electricity. Here, you're fumbling with a flint and steel, coaxing a flame into a small clay lamp, then watching it sputter and smoke, casting wavering shadows that dance like restless ghosts. The light is dim, barely adequate for reading, and the constant threat of fire is a low hum beneath the surface of daily life. You find yourself instinctively reaching for a non-existent dimmer switch, then sighing as you remember the only adjustment available is adding more oil, or simply accepting the gloom. It's like living in a permanent, low-budget horror movie, but instead of jump scares, you get eye strain. Then there's the water. Roman aqueducts, truly one of the wonders of the ancient world. You marvel at the engineering, the sheer scale of the arches marching across the landscape, bringing fresh water from distant springs into the city. It's a mainstream historical fact that these structures were revolutionary, providing public fountains and baths with a constant supply. But in your private dwelling, it's a different story. No indoor plumbing as you know it. You rely on servants to fetch water from the nearest fountain, a laborious process involving heavy amphorae. And the latrines, oh the latrines. Public ones are communal affairs, often with a trench of running water beneath the seats, which sounds hygienic until you realize everyone is sharing the same sponge on a stick for cleaning. Private homes? Chamber pots. Lots and lots of chamber pots. And the smell, good heavens, the smell. You've tried to subtly suggest better ventilation, or perhaps the radical concept of not pouring waste directly into the street, but you have to be careful. It simply smells richer in this district. You might mumble, trying to sound like a connoisseur of Roman urban aromas, while your stomach does a little flip-flop. Communication is another daily battle. You're accustomed to instantaneous global connection, a world where information travels at the speed of light. Here, a message from a distant city might take weeks, carried by a messenger on horseback. News is slow, often distorted, and entirely dependent on human reliability. You constantly catch yourself thinking, just Google it, or I'll send an email, before the crushing reality of scrolls, wax tablets, and the sheer physical effort of writing sets in. Imagine trying to explain Wi-Fi to someone who thinks the fastest way to send a message is via carrier pigeon. You'd get committed to an asylum faster than you can say, fiber optics. There's a scholarly debate in your time about how much faster Roman communication could have been if they'd optimized their road networks for dedicated postal services rather than primarily military and trade routes. You, having experienced both ends of the spectrum, just want to scream, just invent the internet already. Your modern understanding of physics and engineering is a constant source of both frustration and accidental brilliance. You see Roman cranes, ingenious devices powered by human treadmills, lifting massive stones for temples and amphitheaters. You understand the principles of leverage and counterweights, but you also see inefficiencies, points of stress, and materials that could be stronger. You've had to bite your tongue on countless occasions, watching a construction project and resisting the urge to blurt out, if you just added a diagonal brace here, it would be far more stable. Instead, you might offer a casual observation. The master builder seems to favor a very robust design, doesn't he? Perhaps a little too robust in places. You once observed a blacksmith struggling with a particularly stubborn piece of iron and almost suggested a simple technique for heat treating it, caught yourself, and instead offered a remarkably accurate prediction about when the iron would finally yield, making it seem like you had an uncanny knack for metalworking, rather than a basic understanding of metallurgy. Then there's the simple act of keeping time. Forget atomic clocks or even your smartphone's precise digital display. Here, time is measured by sundials, which are useless on cloudy days, or by water clocks, which are prone to inaccuracies and require constant refilling. You find yourself estimating time by the position of the sun, the length of shadows, or the general hubbub of the marketplace. Appointments are rarely precise. Around midday or after the third hour are common. You, with your internal clock calibrated to the nanosecond, feel perpetually off-kilter, like living in a world where everyone's watch is just slightly wrong. It makes planning anything complex a logistical nightmare. The medical practices, oh dear. Your knowledge of germ theory, of invisible pathogens, is a terrifying secret. You watch as doctors prescribe bizarre concoctions, perform crude surgeries, and bleed patients to balance the humors. It's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some Roman medical texts even suggested using spiderwebs to staunch bleeding, likely due to their natural antiseptic properties, though the Romans wouldn't have understood why it worked. You, however, know exactly why it might, and it's not because spiders are magic. You've developed an almost obsessive hand-washing ritual, explaining it away as a personal quirk, a superstitious habit you picked up from a distant, mysterious land. You subtly advocate for boiling water before consumption, for cleaning wounds with plain water, rather than applying questionable poultices, and for isolating the sick. You frame these suggestions as traditional remedies from your homeland or personal preferences for cleanliness, always careful not to reveal the underlying scientific principles that would brand you as a sorcerer or a madman. It's a constant tightrope walk, wanting to help, but knowing that the slightest deviation from accepted wisdom could lead to your undoing. Every time you witness a simple infection turn fatal, you feel a pang of agony, knowing you could have prevented it with a basic antibiotic, a concept entirely alien here. Even something as fundamental as writing is a struggle. Papyrus scrolls are bulky, fragile, and difficult to navigate. Wax tablets are reusable, but temporary. There's no easy way to copy documents, no printing press, no digital files. Every word is painstakingly written by hand, often by a scribe. You miss keyboards, the ability to instantly edit, to search for a specific word in a massive document. You've had moments where you've almost asked, "Can you just copy-paste that paragraph?" before catching yourself and instead saying, "Perhaps the scribe could rewrite that section with a slightly different flourish?" You find yourself subconsciously trying to scroll a physical scroll, a habit that must look utterly bizarre to any Roman observing you. Your anachronistic knowledge isn't just about what you know, but what you don't instinctively do. You don't automatically reach for the communal sponge. You don't accept every medical diagnosis without an internal shudder. You don't simply marvel at a Roman arch without mentally calculating its stress points. You live in a constant state of internal translation, converting every experience, every piece of Roman technology, into its modern equivalent, and then back again just to function. It's exhausting, a perpetual mental gymnastics routine that leaves you drained by the end of each long, smoky, and surprisingly smelly Roman day. The world you inhabit is a vibrant, chaotic tapestry of life, but beneath the surface of your carefully constructed Roman persona, a monumental secret festers. It's a constant low hum of anxiety, a whisper in your mind that you're living a lie, a performance that can crumble with a single misstep. This burden, heavier than any Roman legionary's pack, makes genuine connection a perilous tightrope walk. Yet, paradoxically, it is in these very connections that you find fleeting moments of solace, even as they amplify the emotional toll of your deception. You crave authenticity, but every interaction is filtered through the lens of your impossible origin. You find yourself gravitating towards a few individuals, not necessarily those of high standing, but those whose inherent kindness or quiet observation offers a strange comfort. One such soul is Lyra, a domestic slave in the household you've managed to embed yourself within. She's perhaps in her late teens, with nimble fingers that deftly arrange amphorae of oil and wine, and eyes that seem to miss nothing, yet judge little. Your interactions with her begin out of necessity. Learning the proper way to fold a toga, it's surprisingly complicated, like trying to origami a bedsheet, or understanding the intricacies of Roman meal times, which, let's be honest, often involve more reclining than actual eating. Lyra, you observe, possesses a quiet dignity, a resilience born of circumstance. She moves through the house like a phantom, anticipating needs before they're voiced. You watch her, sometimes, as she patiently mends a tunic, her brow furrowed in concentration, and you feel a strange pang of guilt. You, a temporal tourist, possess knowledge that could fundamentally alter her life, yet you are bound by an invisible, unbreakable oath of silence. The temptation to share, to explain the future, to tell her that one day, people won't be bought and sold like cattle, is immense. There's a constant, aching pressure behind your ribs. But you know, with chilling certainty, that such a revelation would not only shatter her world but likely end yours. So, you offer small kindnesses instead, a gentle word, a shared piece of fruit, a moment of eye contact that acknowledges her humanity beyond her station. These tiny gestures are your silent apologies for the secrets you keep, and her quiet acceptance is a balm to your lonely heart. One sweltering afternoon, as you attempt to navigate the labyrinthine nuances of Roman bathing rituals. Seriously, the sheer number of steps from undressing to oiling to scraping to splashing is a workout in itself. Lyra hands you a strigil, a curved metal tool used to scrape off oil and dirt. You fumble with it, nearly dropping it into the cold plunge pool. It takes practice, Dominus, she says, her voice soft, a hint of amusement in her eyes. You manage a weak smile. Indeed, Lyra, in my homeland we have simpler methods. You catch yourself almost adding running water and soap, but bite back the words. She merely nods, accustomed to your occasional odd pronouncements. Later, you find her humming a tuneless melody as she grinds herbs for dinner, and you realize you've grown to appreciate the quiet rhythm of her presence. She's a constant, stable point in your dizzying, anachronistic existence. It's a one-sided confession, really. You pour your unspoken anxieties into the space between your words, and she, unknowingly, absorbs them with her steady presence. The emotional weight of this deception is immense. You yearn to truly connect, to share the crushing burden of your knowledge, but every instinct screams at you to maintain the charade. It's like having a deep, profound conversation with someone, but only being able to speak in riddles. Beyond the confines of the household, you also forge an unlikely, albeit more guarded, bond with Marcus, a potter whose stall you frequent in the bustling forum. Marcus is a gruff man, his hands permanently stained with clay, but he possesses a sharp wit and an even sharper eye for detail. You initially seek him out for practical reasons, needing a specific kind of vessel, perhaps, or a repair for something clumsily broken. But soon, your conversations extend beyond mere transactions. He's fascinated by your foreign ways, your unusual requests, and your seemingly boundless curiosity about the practical mechanics of his craft. You find yourself spending hours at his stall, watching him work, the rhythmic thump-thump of his wheel a surprisingly soothing sound amidst the cacophony of the market. You ask questions that no Roman would, questions about tensile strength, about the optimal firing temperatures, about the chemical composition of his glazes. Marcus, initially bewildered, eventually warms to your eccentricities, mistaking your advanced knowledge for an unusual form of scholarly interest. You have a strange mind, outsider, he'd grumble, a smile playing on his lips. like a potter who tries to make a pot that holds air, not water. You'd laugh. A genuine, unforced laugh, rare in this existence. One particularly busy market day, a customer, clearly a haughty matron, loudly complains about a cracked amphora she bought from Marcus. She demands a full refund and threatens to report him to the ediles. Marcus, usually unflappable, looks genuinely distressed. You, with your subtle understanding of the physics of ceramics, and perhaps a bit of modern quality control insight, quickly examine the amphora. You notice a hairline fracture, likely caused by improper handling after it left Marcus's stall, not by a defect in his craftsmanship. You calmly step forward, explaining to the irate woman, in precise, logical terms, how the crack propagates from a specific point of impact, not from a structural weakness inherent to the pot. You even manage to draw a quick, discrete diagram in the dust with your finger, illustrating the stress points. The matron, flustered by your unexpected, detailed explanation, eventually backs down, appeased by Marcus's offer of a replacement and your surprisingly convincing, albeit anachronistic, analysis. Marcus looks at you with a new respect, a flicker of something akin to awe in his eyes. "You are more than just a scholar, friend," he says later, offering you a cup of watered wine. "You see things others do not." You merely shrug, a knot forming in your stomach. The thrill of helping him is quickly overshadowed by the chilling realization of how close you came to revealing too much. You had to carefully select your words, avoiding any modern terminology, framing your observations in a way that sounded like astute intuition rather than scientific understanding. This constant mental gymnastics is exhausting, a never-ending game of charades where the stakes are your very existence. Historians still argue whether the Roman common people truly understood basic scientific principles or if their impressive engineering feats were purely empirical. You, however, are living proof that even a little bit of modern physics can be dangerously out of place. The relationships you build are fragile, delicate things like ancient papyrus scrolls easily torn. Every conversation is a minefield of potential slip-ups. You learn to speak in generalities, to nod sagely when you have no idea what they're talking about, and to feign ignorance about things that are glaringly obvious to you. For instance, when someone marvels at the sheer engineering marvel of the Roman aqueducts, and they are impressive, you have to admit, far more aesthetically pleasing than, say, a modern water treatment plant, you have to bite your tongue from explaining how easily a modern pump could do the job of 100 slaves. Or when you hear people discuss omens from bird flights, you have to resist the urge to point out that the birds are probably just looking for snacks, not delivering divine messages. It's a constant performance, a charade that isolates you even as you seek connection. The irony is not lost on you. You are surrounded by people, yet utterly alone in your temporal displacement. You miss the casual banter of your own time, the easy understanding, the shared cultural touchstones. Here, every joke feels forced, every genuine emotion carefully masked. It's like living perpetually on a first date where you're trying to impress someone with a completely fabricated personality. The emotional toll is profound. You feel the constant ache of longing for true companionship, for someone with whom you don't have to carry the crushing weight of your secret. You feel it in the air, a subtle but undeniable shift in the rhythm of Rome. It's not just the usual hum of chariots and the babble of 1,000 conversations. There's a tautness, a barely perceptible tremor beneath the surface of daily life. You've been reading the diary entries that chronicle this period, and the traveler's growing sense of dread is palpable. They don't name names, not yet, but the hints are there. Hushed conversations in the forum, nervous glances exchanged among senators, the sudden, chilling silence that falls when a certain powerful figure walks by. It's the Ides of March, a day that, to most Romans, is just another date on the calendar, perhaps a day for settling debts. But you, through the traveler's eyes, know it's so much more. You know it's the kind of date that gets underlined in history books with a thick red marker, the kind of day that changes everything. The traveler, always so meticulous, records the strange omens that precede this fateful day. They describe the unusual storm that swept through Rome just days prior, the unsettling dreams that plagued many, and the almost comical stubbornness of the man at the center of it all. You read about the frantic warnings from his wife, Calpurnia, who reportedly dreamt of her husband bleeding to death in her arms, and of the house collapsing. It's a detail that always makes you wonder about the power of premonition, or perhaps just the power of a really bad night's sleep after too much garum. The traveler notes how these warnings, so clear to them in hindsight, are dismissed by the great general with a wave of his hand, a testament to his almost arrogant confidence. You can almost hear the traveler sighing, a quiet, frustrated sound, knowing what's coming but utterly powerless to stop it. It's like watching a movie where you know the killer is behind the door, but the characters just keep walking towards it, humming a happy tune. The morning of the Ides dawns with an unseasonable chill. You follow the traveler as they move through the city, their senses heightened, picking up on every nuance. The usual morning rush feels different. There's a quiet urgency in the air, a sense of anticipation that isn't festive. You see the hawkers still shouting their wares, the bakers pulling fresh bread from ovens, but it's as if everyone is holding their breath, waiting for an unseen cue. The traveler describes walking past the Curia of Pompey, the temporary Senate house where the fateful meeting is to take place. They linger, perhaps hoping for a sign, a way to intervene, even a meaningless gesture to alter the course of events. But the Roman world, in its relentless march, pays no heed to the anxieties of a lone time traveler. It just keeps on doing its thing, like a very large, very well-oiled machine oblivious to the tiny wrench about to be thrown into its gears. The diary entries become fragmented, almost breathless, as the moment approaches. The traveler doesn't get a front-row seat, thankfully, which spares you the most gruesome details. Instead, they recount the sudden, sharp shift in the city's mood. One moment, the usual cacophony of Rome fills the air. The next, a collective gasp seems to ripple through the streets. A distant clamor erupts, carried on the wind from the direction of the Curia. It's not the roar of a cheering crowd or the angry shouts of a protest. It's a sound of confusion, of alarm, of something profoundly wrong. You imagine the traveler, standing frozen in a bustling marketplace, suddenly aware that the world they inhabit is fracturing. The everyday chatter around them dies down, replaced by whispers, then shouts, then a frantic, uncoordinated scramble. You can almost feel the chill that runs down the traveler's spine as the news spreads like wildfire, whispered from mouth to ear, growing louder with each repetition. Caesar is dead. The words hang in the air, heavy and unbelievable. This is the mainstream historical fact that anchors this entire experience. Julius Caesar, the man who had effectively ended the Roman Republic and laid the groundwork for the empire, was assassinated on March 15, 44 BCE, by a group of senators, including Brutus and Cassius. The traveler, knowing the profound implications of this single act, describes the immediate chaos that ensues. People scatter, shops slam shut, and the once orderly streets dissolve into a swirling eddy of fear and uncertainty. It's as if someone pulled the plug on the Roman equivalent of the internet, and everyone just started running around asking, "Wait, what just happened? Is my social media feed going to update?" The traveler recounts how they sought refuge in a quiet alcove, watching the unfolding drama with a detached, almost clinical horror. They see senators, their togas disheveled, running through the streets, some with faces of triumph, others with stark terror. They witness the confusion of the common people, who, unlike the traveler, don't have the benefit of a detailed history textbook. They don't know that this act of liberation will plunge Rome into years of civil war, ultimately leading to the very imperial system the conspirators claim to oppose. It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? Trying to save something by destroying its most prominent figure, only to pave the way for something even more absolute. You feel the traveler's frustration, the unique burden of knowing the future, of seeing the grand tapestry of history being woven with threads of misunderstanding and misplaced idealism. The diary entries from the immediate aftermath are particularly poignant. The traveler notes how quickly the atmosphere shifts from shock to a strange, uneasy calm, punctuated by bursts of fear. The conspirators, initially hailed by some as heroes, soon find themselves isolated, their grand plan unraveling. You read about the public's wavering loyalty, swayed by Mark Antony's powerful eulogy and the revelation of Caesar's will. It's fascinating, this rapid change in public opinion, a stark reminder that even in ancient Rome, narratives could be spun and emotions manipulated. The traveler, with their modern understanding of mass media and political rhetoric, sees the strings being pulled, the subtle shifts in power dynamics that are invisible to the native Romans. They witness the funeral pyre, the collective grief of the Roman plebs, and the dawning realization among the conspirators that their act, intended as a surgical strike, has instead unleashed a tempest. This event, the assassination of Julius Caesar, becomes a touchstone for the traveler's profound temporal reflections. They ponder the nature of free will versus historical determinism. Could Caesar have truly avoided his fate? Was his ambition so colossal that it was bound to lead to such a violent end, regardless of the specific actors? Historians still argue whether Caesar's death was a desperate act to save the Republic or merely an acceleration of its demise, leading directly to the Augustan Empire. The traveler's unique perspective, living through the immediate consequences, offers a chilling insight. It was less about saving a system and more about a bloody power vacuum. They write about the sheer helplessness of knowing the future but being unable to alter it, a kind of cosmic voyeurism that is both exhilarating and deeply depressing. Imagine knowing precisely when your favorite coffee shop is going to run out of oat milk, but being unable to warn anyone. It's that kind of frustration, but with much higher stakes. As the days turn into weeks, the echoes of the Ides of March continue to reverberate. The traveler observes the political maneuvering, the formation of new alliances, the subtle shifts in power as different factions vie for control. They see the fear in the eyes of those who sided with Caesar and the nervous bravado of those who opposed him. This pivotal event, witnessed firsthand, imprints itself deeply on their psyche. It's not just a historical fact anymore. It's a lived experience, a moment of profound disruption that reshapes their understanding of time, destiny, and the fragile nature of human ambition. You realize, as you read these entries, that witnessing history unfold isn't just about seeing the big moments. It's about feeling the tremors they send through the very fabric of society and understanding the countless unseen lives they irrevocably alter. And the traveler, with their unique vantage point, feels every single one. The air in ancient Rome, even on its most serene days, always carries a faint hum of underlying tension for you. It's not the buzz of the marketplace or the distant rumble of chariot wheels, but a low, constant thrum of fear, the fear of exposure. You live every waking moment with the knowledge that one wrong word, one accidental gesture, one slip of modern logic could unravel everything. It's like trying to navigate a minefield blindfolded, where the mines are invisible cultural nuances and the blindfold is your own anachronistic brain. You're always on high alert, your senses hypertuned to potential pitfalls, constantly performing mental gymnastics to translate your innate understanding of the world into something a Roman could comprehend. And let me tell you, there were some truly heart-stopping moments. Moments where your careful facade nearly shattered, scattering your secrets like broken pottery across the forum. One particularly harrowing close call occurs during a casual conversation about the city's notoriously pungent smell. You're chatting with a local merchant, a jovial man named Lucius, who is complaining about the stench emanating from a nearby overflowing drain. By Jupiter's beard, he groans, waving a perfumed handkerchief dismissively. One could almost taste the sewers today. You nod empathetically, having long since grown accustomed to the unique bouquet of Roman urban life, a heady mix of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and the ever-present garum. But then, without thinking, you blurt out, if only they had proper closed systems like the cloaca maxima, but everywhere, and with, traps to prevent the gases from rising. Lucius stops, his eyes narrowing slightly. He looks at you, not with anger, but with a quizzical, almost suspicious gaze. Traps? He repeats slowly, as if tasting a foreign word. What manner of trap would hold the very breath of the earth, friend? Are you speaking of some new engineering marvel known only to the gods? Your heart lurches. You've gone too far. You've accidentally described a modern plumbing trap, a concept utterly alien to them, even with their impressive cloaca maxima. which, by the way, was more of an open sewer with a fancy name, not quite the enclosed, odor-controlled system you're used to. It's like trying to explain Wi-Fi to someone who thinks the fastest communication is a carrier pigeon. You quickly backtrack, your mind racing. Ah, no, Lucius. Forgive my clumsy tongue. I was merely musing about the ideal state of cleanliness, perhaps a pipe dream from an old philosopher's scroll. A theoretical concept, you understand. Like trying to catch a cloud in a net. You force a nervous laugh, hoping it sounds natural and not like a hyena being strangled. Lucius eyes you for a moment longer, then shrugs, clearly amused by your odd philosophical ramblings rather than suspicious. Indeed, a pipe dream, he chuckles, resuming his complaints about the smell. You exhale slowly, your palms suddenly sweaty. Close call number 1. Your casual tendency to problem-solve like a 21st century human almost cost you everything. You make a mental note to stick to observations, not innovations. It's much safer to marvel at their ingenuity than to accidentally suggest they're a few millennia behind. Another incident, far more chilling, occurs during a senatorial debate. You've managed to secure a minor, unobtrusive position as a scribe for a relatively junior senator, a way to stay informed and blend in. Today, the discussion is heated, revolving around a proposed military campaign. The senator you serve is passionately arguing against it, citing logistical difficulties and the loyalty of certain legions. You're dutifully transcribing, your quill scratching across the wax tablet, when another senator, a pompous, red-faced man known for his ambition, rises to speak. He launches into a scathing attack on your senator's patriotism, accusing him of cowardice and even suggesting disloyalty to the emperor. He declares, with dramatic flourish, that those who stand against this righteous war will find themselves standing alone, abandoned by the gods and the emperor's favor. Your senator, pale but resolute, stands to retort. But before he can utter a word, a sudden, involuntary whisper escapes your lips. You know this senator. You know his fate. He will be purged within the year, accused of maestas or treason, by the very man who is now praising the emperor's favor. This is a mainstream historical fact, well documented in your own time. The constant paranoia and purges under certain emperors, where even a whisper of dissent could lead to a charge of maestas and a brutal end. You'd read about this particular purge in countless history books. Your whisper is barely audible, a mere breath. He'll be dead within the year, ironically, by this very accusation. The senator next to you, a quiet man who rarely speaks, stiffens. He turns his head slowly, his eyes, usually placid, now wide with alarm. He heard you. You see the dawning comprehension, the flicker of fear mixed with utter disbelief in his gaze. He clutches his stylus so tightly his knuckles whiten. You freeze, your blood turning to ice water. You've not only revealed knowledge of the future, but knowledge of a politically sensitive and deadly future. This isn't just a social faux pas. This is a direct threat to the established order, a challenge to the very fabric of Roman power and imperial authority. It's akin to walking into a modern spy agency and casually mentioning you know who the mole is before they do. You immediately force a cough, loud and theatrical, then pretend to choke on a piece of lint. "Forgive me, honored senator," you gasp, feigning a fit of coughing. A tickle in the throat. "I was merely thinking aloud about the mortality of all men, even the most powerful. A philosophical musing, you understand. The gods determine all our fates." The quiet senator looks at you with a mixture of suspicion and pity. He clearly doesn't believe your excuse, but the public setting, the ongoing debate, and perhaps a flicker of self-preservation prevent him from pressing the issue. He simply shakes his head slowly, then turns back to the debate, though you can feel his eyes occasionally darting towards you throughout the rest of the session. You spend the remainder of the day in a cold sweat, convinced he will report you, that the Praetorian Guard will be at your door by sunset. But they never come. The quiet senator, it seems, has decided that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, even with himself. Or perhaps he simply dismissed you as a madman, which, frankly, is often your best defense. Then there's the time you nearly gave yourself away at a private dinner party, a much more intimate, and thus more perilous, setting. The host, a wealthy patron, was showing off his collection of exotic animals, a common display of wealth among the Roman elite. He had a magnificent peacock, a pair of trained monkeys, and then, with great fanfare, he unveiled a small, furry creature in a cage. "Behold!" he boomed, gesturing grandly. "A creature from the Far East, said to bring good fortune. A panda." You almost choke on your garum-soaked bread. A panda? This was clearly a badger, a rather grumpy-looking badger, but definitely a badger. The Romans did have a fascination with exotic animals, often misidentifying them or exaggerating their origins. This was a quirky, fringe tidbit you'd come across in your research: how often animals were imported and then mislabeled due to lack of knowledge or sheer showmanship. You wanted to blurt out, "That's not a panda, you glorious idiot, that's a mele's," but you caught yourself just in time. Instead, you offered a polite, if slightly strained, "Truly magnificent host, its markings are most unusual." Later, during the feast, the conversation turned to omens and prophecies. The host, having consumed a good deal of wine, began recounting a dream he'd had, involving a flock of blackbirds flying west. He was convinced it portended ill fortune for his upcoming business venture. Everyone around the table offered their interpretations, some serious, some flippant. One guest, a self-proclaimed augur, began drawing intricate patterns in the spilled wine on the table, muttering about entrails and the flight of birds. You, having grown up in a world of meteorology and satellite imagery, found the whole exercise utterly baffling, yet fascinating in its earnestness. You almost made a joke about checking the weather app. But then, prompted by the host, you were asked for your interpretation. Your mind again scrambled. You knew nothing of Roman augury beyond the basic concept. You couldn't pretend to understand their complex system of signs. Some scholars still debate the true significance and systematic nature of Roman augury, arguing whether it was a genuine spiritual practice or largely a political tool. You definitely weren't qualified to weigh in. So you decided to pivot. "Honored host," you began, trying to sound profound. "Perhaps the blackbirds fly west not as an omen of ill fortune, but as a simple, natural migration. Birds, after all, follow the seasons and the sun. Sometimes, a bird is just a bird." The table fell silent. The augur's face, previously contorted in concentration, now looked like he'd just been told his pet raven could actually talk. The host stared, mouth slightly agape. You had effectively dismissed a deeply held Roman belief system with a single, anachronistic statement of biological pragmatism. It was like telling a medieval knight that dragons aren't real. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. You could feel the collective bewilderment, the subtle shift in their perception of you. You were no longer just an odd foreigner. You were potentially impious, perhaps even a dangerous skeptic. You quickly added, "Of course, the gods work in mysterious ways, and who are we, mere mortals, to question their divine messages? My humble thoughts are merely that of a simple traveler, unversed in the profound wisdom of Roman augury. Perhaps the blackbirds were merely seeking a better worm population." You managed a sheepish smile, hoping your self-deprecation would smooth things over. The host, after a long moment, burst out laughing, a loud, booming sound that broke the tension. "A simple traveler indeed," he declared, slapping his thigh. "But one with a refreshingly modern perspective. Perhaps you're right. Sometimes a bird is just a bird. More wine." You breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that your strange logic had been interpreted as eccentric wit rather than blasphemy. Another bullet dodged, thanks to the Roman love for novelty and, apparently, a good laugh. These moments, these tiny cracks in your carefully constructed persona, were a constant reminder of the thin ice you walked on. There was the time you nearly pulled out your phone to check the date, only to remember you were in a world where time was marked by sundials and the rising of the Pleiades. Or the time you instinctively reached for a light switch in a dimly lit villa. Or the agonizing moment you almost hummed a pop song from your own era, only to catch yourself and hum a dreadful Roman drinking song instead. Each near miss chipped away at your composure, adding layers of paranoia to your daily existence. You learned to filter every thought, every impulse, every word before it even formed. It was exhausting, a constant mental war against yourself, against your own nature. The peril of exposure wasn't just about being caught with an anachronistic object. It was about the subtle, insidious ways your mind, steeped in millennia of future knowledge, could betray you. It was about the way you looked at the world, the questions you asked, the assumptions you made. You were a living, breathing paradox, and every interaction was a potential trigger for your undoing. The tension was a constant companion, a silent, invisible weight you carried, a secret that pressed down on you with the crushing force of a Roman aqueduct. And you knew, deep down, that your luck couldn't last forever. The initial shock, the dizzying sensory overload of ancient Rome, it begins to fade. Not entirely. Of course, you're still breathing air that smells faintly of wood smoke and 1,000 unwashed bodies, still hearing the ceaseless din of carts and hawkers and barking dogs. But as the sheer novelty wears off, a colder, more insistent dread settles in. The dread of being utterly, irrevocably stuck. And so, the narrative in the journal shifts, the entries taking on a new, desperate cadence. The time traveler, our intrepid chronicler, turns their focus entirely to one monumental, seemingly impossible task: the quest for return. You begin to read of their painstaking efforts, a mental excavation of every detail of their original departure from their own time. Was it a specific energy signature? A particular configuration of fields? A unique blend of atmospheric conditions? The diary details their attempts to recall the precise scientific principles involved, scribbling equations in the margins of parchment, equations that would look like arcane symbols to any Roman scholar, or perhaps just a very bad case of a fever dream. You can almost hear the scratching of the stylus, the frustrated sighs. Their first, most immediate thought is to try and replicate the conditions of their arrival. But how do you even begin to do that when the very concept of temporal displacement is as alien as a smartphone to these people? They meticulously scout locations, searching for any anomalies, strange magnetic fields, unusual geological formations, even places reputed to be haunted or cursed, hoping for some faint echo of the energies that had ripped them from their own epoch. You read of nights spent clambering over the 7 hills, peering into dark grottos, or standing silently in the ruins of older, pre-Roman settlements, listening for what? Exactly? A hum? A resonance? Mostly, you imagine, they heard the chirping of crickets and the distant braying of a donkey, which, while charmingly rustic, isn't exactly a temporal gateway. The traveler quickly comes to a sobering realization: the sheer technological chasm. How do you build a temporal displacement unit with bronze tools and a rudimentary understanding of electromagnetism? It's like trying to bake a souffle using only a hammer and a rock. The journal entries detail increasingly complex thought experiments, trying to bridge this gap. They ponder if Roman understanding of engineering, which was undeniably impressive, the kind of engineering that gave us those incredible aqueducts that still stand today, defying millennia, could be leveraged. Could the strength of Roman concrete, or the precision of their surveying tools, somehow be twisted to a purpose utterly alien to their designers? They begin to seek out Roman scholars, not directly asking about time travel, of course, because that would lead straight to the nearest asylum or, worse, a public execution for witchcraft. Instead, they try to subtly probe their understanding of the cosmos, of natural forces, of the very fabric of reality. You read of conversations with philosophers discussing the nature of existence, with astronomers charting the movements of the stars, often with surprising accuracy, considering the lack of telescopes, and even with alchemists, those ancient seekers of transmutation, who, despite their often fantastical theories, sometimes stumbled upon genuine chemical reactions. The traveler tries to guide these discussions, nudging them towards concepts like energy manipulation or the properties of exotic materials. Their attempts to acquire specific materials become a recurring, often comical theme. How do you explain that you need incredibly pure copper or a specific type of crystal without revealing your hand? You read of them trying to barter for unusual ores or attempting to fashion primitive electromagnets with iron and copper wire, only to produce a weak, almost imperceptible force. Today, one entry reads, "I attempted to create a rudimentary capacitor using a clay pot and some tin foil I'd somehow managed to scrounge. The result was less a powerful energy storage device and more a slightly lopsided, very fragile, and utterly useless piece of pottery. I think the potter thought I was mad. He wasn't wrong. You can almost hear the frustrated sigh in the words. The futility of it all begins to weigh heavily. The diary chronicles their escalating desperation. They try to harness natural phenomena, like lightning. Imagine them, standing on a hill during a thunderstorm, holding aloft a crude metal rod, hoping for some miraculous, accidental temporal discharge. It's a scene out of a bad science fiction movie, only in ancient Rome, and with much higher stakes. Historians still argue whether Roman scientific theory was truly advanced or merely a practical application of empirical observation. But for our traveler, the answer was clear. It wasn't advanced enough. Not by a long shot. One particularly poignant entry details their discovery of a quirky Roman tidbit: the use of magnesia, a type of lodestone or magnetite, for its magnetic properties. They become obsessed with it, trying to understand if the Romans had any theoretical grasp of magnetism beyond its ability to attract iron. They experiment with rubbing amber to generate static electricity, a phenomenon known even to the Greeks, hoping to scale it up. You picture them, diligently rubbing pieces of amber, trying to get a spark, a jolt, anything that might hint at a path home. All the while, the Romans around them probably just thought they were trying to polish their jewelry in a very peculiar way. The journal entries become a litany of failed experiments, each one chipping away at their hope. There are attempts to create specific harmonic frequencies using makeshift instruments, trying to mimic what they recall of the temporal device's activation sequence. You read of them trying to calculate stellar alignments, hoping to find a cosmic window, a celestial alignment that might coincide with a temporal nexus. They learn about the Roman calendar, the Julian calendar, and its complexities, trying to find patterns, repeating cycles that might offer a clue. It's a testament to their brilliance and their sheer stubbornness that they don't give up immediately. But the underlying current of futility is ever present. Each failed attempt reinforces the crushing reality. They are a fish out of water, not just culturally but fundamentally. Their knowledge, so powerful in their own time, is almost useless here, like trying to fix a broken chariot with a quantum physics textbook. They can't even explain why they need certain things, let alone how they plan to use them. The attempts grow more desperate, bordering on the superstitious. They investigate ancient Roman myths of portals to the underworld, or places where the veil between worlds was thin, hoping against hope that some ancient folklore might hold a grain of truth that modern science had forgotten. You can almost hear the exasperated sigh in the margins of one entry. Today I consulted a soothsayer about anomalous energy readings. He recommended a sacrifice of a white bull. I politely declined, explaining that my research required something a little less bovine. The narrative shifts from scientific inquiry to a more frantic, almost spiritual quest. They begin to understand that without the precise technology, without the very foundation of scientific understanding that enabled their journey, their efforts are akin to a Roman trying to build a rocket to the moon using only clay bricks and a strong belief in Jupiter. The journal becomes a chronicle of diminishing returns, of ingenious ideas meeting insurmountable obstacles, of the growing, creeping realization that the quest for return might be, in this age, truly, tragically impossible. You sit, hunched over the worn pages, the oil lamp casting long, flickering shadows across the room. The familiar scent of ancient parchment, a blend of cured animal hide and forgotten ink, fills your nostrils, a peculiar comfort in this alien world. Outside, the distant murmur of Rome sleeps fitfully, a symphony of creaking carts and the occasional bark of a stray dog. This is your time for quiet contemplation, for the diary to become less a chronicle of events and more a conduit for profound, unsettling thoughts. Your journey here, from a future that now feels like a half-remembered dream, has irrevocably warped your understanding of time itself. You used to think of it as a river, flowing ever onward, a linear progression from past to present to future. But now you see it more like a vast, multidimensional tapestry, where past and future are woven together in intricate, sometimes horrifying ways. You exist simultaneously as a ghost from an impossible future and a fleeting presence in a vibrant past. It's like being stuck in an infinite loop of a particularly bad elevator music track. Only the music is the entire history of human civilization, and you can't get off. You ponder humanity's constants. Despite the millennia separating your origin from this present, you've witnessed the same fundamental human emotions, the same driving forces. The ambition of a senator vying for power, the tender love of a parent for their child, the petty jealousies in the marketplace, the joyous laughter at a banquet, the gnawing fear of disease or invasion. It's all here, just dressed in tunics instead of what you'd call sensible trousers. You've seen Roman mothers fret over their children's education, much like modern parents stress about college applications. The worries are universal, truly. It makes you wonder if future humans will still be arguing about who left the toilet seat up, even if the toilet is now a holographic projection. Probably. And then there's the illusion of progress. You came from a world of dazzling technology, instant communication, and medical marvels. Yet, looking at Rome, you see the seeds of so many persistent problems. The vast chasm between the opulent wealthy and the struggling poor, the ruthless political maneuvering, the environmental impact of a burgeoning city. Though they don't call it that yet, they just call it smog and that nasty smell by the Tiber. You observe their ingenious engineering, like the impressive Roman road network, which you know will endure for centuries, still visible in parts of Europe even in your original time. But you also see the hubris, the belief in their own eternal dominance, oblivious to the eventual decline. It's a sobering thought. Humanity might just be very good at making new mistakes while repeating the old ones with fancier tools. We're like a cat chasing a laser pointer, endlessly distracted, sometimes graceful, often ridiculous. The weight of your knowledge is a constant, crushing burden. You know the fate of this magnificent city, the rise and fall of emperors, the eventual schism of the empire, the barbarian invasions. You know the eventual scientific discoveries, the philosophical shifts, the technological leaps that will render so much of their current world obsolete. You watch a skilled Roman physician using rudimentary tools, knowing that in your time, a simple antibiotic could cure ailments that now claim countless lives. It's like watching a play where you already know the ending, but you can't shout warnings to the actors. You can't tell them to invest in a diversified portfolio or, maybe boil their water. Your personal identity has become a shifting, ethereal thing. Are you still the person who stepped through that temporal rift? Or have you become something else, a hybrid of epochs, a ghost in the machine of history? You remember the taste of synthetic protein bars and the hum of electric vehicles, but now the most exotic thing you've eaten is garum, which, let's be honest, tastes like a fishy punch in the face. Your memories of the future are vivid, yet increasingly distant, like old photographs fading in the sun. You find yourself thinking in Latin, instinctively measuring distances in paces, and sometimes, just sometimes, you catch yourself wondering if the latest gladiatorial match will be a good one, before remembering that you're supposed to be above such things. You're a paradox wrapped in a toga, an anomaly trying to blend in. You reflect on the concept of legacy. What truly endures? Not just the roads and the aqueducts, but the ideas, the laws, the stories. You've seen firsthand how the Roman legal system, with its emphasis on justice and order, will echo through millennia, forming the bedrock of many future legal frameworks. Yet, you also know how much is lost, how much is misinterpreted. You've read the scholarly debates in your own time about the precise nature of Roman daily life for the plebeians, their true economic status, or the intricacies of their social mobility. Here, it's just life, messy and unexamined by future historians. You've even noticed a quirky tidbit about Roman superstitions, how they put immense stock in augury, interpreting the flight of birds or the entrails of sacrificed animals to predict the future. You, who know the future or a future, find it ironically quaint, a charmingly unscientific attempt to grasp what you already hold, albeit tragically, in your mind. The future you came from, your own temporal epoch, now feels incredibly fragile. Your desperate attempts to return have yielded nothing but frustration and deeper isolation. You ponder the possibility that your original timeline might have shifted, or even ceased to exist, a terrifying thought. Are you a refugee from a non-existent future? Or simply marooned, a single ripple in a cosmic pond? This uncertainty amplifies the profound philosophical questions. If time is indeed a tapestry, and you've pulled a loose thread, what happens to the whole fabric? Do your actions, however small, create ripples that change the future you know? Or are you merely a passive observer, a silent witness to a predetermined historical play? You've witnessed pivotal moments, moments that historians in your time would analyze for centuries. You've been close enough to smell the fear and ambition of men whose names would be etched into history books. And you've seen the ordinary, the mundane, the everyday struggles and joys that rarely make it into the grand narratives. You've sat in a Roman tavern, listening to the gossip, and realized that even across 2,000 years, people complain about their boss, their taxes, and the quality of the local wine. It's almost comforting, in a strange way. The journal becomes your confessional, the only place where these thoughts, too dangerous and too profound for any Roman ear, can be safely expressed. You write about the absurdity of being a time traveler, about the profound loneliness of holding secrets that could shatter the very reality of those around you. You reflect on the cyclical nature of power, the enduring human need for connection, and the terrifying indifference of the universe to individual lives, regardless of which temporal epoch they inhabit. You wonder if, when your journey ends, you will simply fade into the annals of this past, another forgotten face in the Roman crowd, or if your anomaly will somehow leave a ripple, a faint echo, that will reach your own time. The silence of the night offers no answers, only the steady beat of your own heart, a drum against the vast, unknowable expanse of time. You feel it, don't you? That slow, insidious creep of dread that settles into your bones, even as the Roman sun beats down, seemingly oblivious to the internal storm raging within our time traveler. What started as an exhilarating, terrifying plunge into the past, a grand adventure of impossible scale, has now, for them, curdled into a relentless, soul-crushing grind. You watch as the initial awe and even the frantic energy of survival begin to give way to a profound, bone-deep weariness. It's a weariness that seeps into every pore, every thought, like a persistent Roman fever that simply refuses to break. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer, unrelenting effort it takes to exist in a world that is fundamentally not yours. Every single interaction, every step you take, every bite of food you eat, every gesture you make, is a conscious performance. You're not just acting a part, you're living a part 24/7 with no off switch, no backstage where you can drop the mask and just be yourself. It's like being perpetually on a first date, but the date lasts for years, and your life depends on them never realizing you're from 1,000 years in the future. Exhausting, right? Your time traveler feels this exhaustion in their very marrow. The quick wit, the observational humor that once peppered their entries, now seem to have been replaced by a heavy, almost somber tone. The sensory overload that once fascinated now grates. The constant, unceasing clamor of Rome, the creak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the shouts of vendors hawking their wares, the distant roar of the Colosseum, the ever-present drone of Latin spoken in a dozen different accents. It's no longer a symphony of antiquity, but a cacophony that scrapes at their nerves. You feel their longing for silence, for the quiet hum of modern appliances, for the gentle hush of air conditioning. Even the smells, once exotic and intriguing, the earthy scent of the unpaved streets, the pungent aroma of garum, that fermented fish sauce that was everywhere, the faint whiff of unwashed bodies mingled with expensive perfumes. They now contribute to a pervasive sense of displacement. It's like living in a perpetual historical reenactment, but you're the only one who knows it's not real, and you can't leave. The diary entries begin to reflect a growing despondency. You read between the lines, sensing the slow erosion of their once unbreakable resolve. The simple act of obtaining food becomes a chore, not an adventure. The complex social dance of Roman society, once a fascinating puzzle, is now a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential exposure. You feel the constant vigilance, the way their eyes dart around, scanning for any sign of suspicion, any moment where a slip of the tongue or an anachronistic reaction might betray them. There's a pressure cooker and the steam is building. Then there's the sheer, unadulterated loneliness. Despite the bonds they've forged, the tentative friendships, the quiet moments of connection, There's an impenetrable wall between them and everyone else. How do you explain the concept of a smartphone or democracy as we know it, or even the basic scientific principles that underpin modern medicine, to someone who believes the sun revolves around the earth and illnesses are caused by imbalanced humors? You can't. So you don't. And that silence, that inability to truly share their deepest thoughts, their fears, their very identity, becomes a crushing weight. It's like being the only person who knows a truly hilarious inside joke. But no one else in the room gets it, and you can't even explain why it's funny. Multiply that by every single waking moment, and you start to understand the isolation. Their attempts to return, which you know were once filled with desperate hope, have clearly yielded nothing but frustration and failure. The diary, though careful not to dwell on the specifics of these failed endeavors, perhaps too painful to recount in detail, subtly hints at the mounting futility. Each setback, each dead end, chips away at their spirit, leaving them more vulnerable, more exposed to the psychological toll of their predicament. It's the kind of despair that makes even the most mundane tasks feel monumental. Getting out of bed in the morning, finding something to eat, simply existing each becomes an act of defiant will against a tide of encroaching apathy. You can practically see them, sitting by the sputtering light of an oil lamp, the parchment rough beneath their fingers, grappling with the sheer enormity of their situation. The diary becomes their only confidant, the only place where they can truly be themselves, however briefly. They muse on the fleeting nature of time, the fragility of human existence, and the terrifying prospect of being truly lost. They write of dreams filled with familiar faces and forgotten technologies, only to wake to the harsh reality of Roman clay lamps and the distant sounds of the city. One entry speaks of a particularly difficult day, perhaps after a close call with exposure, or simply a moment where the weight of it all became unbearable. They describe watching a group of children playing with a simple wooden ball, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets. And for a moment, you feel their profound sadness, a yearning for the simple, uncomplicated joy that once filled their own childhood, a joy that now seems irrevocably lost in the annals of history. It's a reminder of what they've sacrificed, not just their home, but perhaps a part of their very self. They note the stark contrast between their internal turmoil and the relentless, almost indifferent march of Roman life. You read of a public holiday, perhaps a festival honoring Jupiter or the Lares, household gods that Romans revered, a mainstream historical fact that highlights the deep religious fabric of their society. While the city bursts with color and celebration, our traveler feels a profound disconnect, a phantom limb ache for a world that truly understands the significance of their journey. They are an observer, a ghost in the machine of history, unable to fully participate, unable to truly belong. The physical toll also becomes apparent. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and unrefreshing, plagued by nightmares of being discovered or of their own time slipping further and further away. You sense the loss of appetite, the general malaise that accompanies profound stress. They write of feeling constantly cold, even in the Roman summer, a chill that seems to emanate from within. It's a slow erosion of their physical well-being, mirroring the decay of their mental fortitude. You can almost hear their sigh, a deep, weary exhalation that holds all the weight of their impossible burden. There's a particularly poignant passage where they reflect on a quirky, fringe tidbit they observed: the Roman fascination with omens and auguries, the belief that the flight of birds or the entrails of sacrificed animals could predict the future. They write of the irony of being able to actually predict the future, to know the rise and fall of emperors, the coming of barbarians, the eventual collapse of this very empire, yet being utterly powerless to change a single thing, or even to use that knowledge to escape their own personal predicament. It's a cruel joke, isn't it? To hold the keys to history, but to be locked out of your own time. The diary entries become shorter, more fragmented, punctuated by moments of raw, unfiltered emotion. You feel the rage, the frustration, the sheer unfairness of their situation. Why them? Why here? Why now? These existential questions, once intellectual curiosities, are now desperate pleas echoing in the silence of their ancient Roman room. Historians still argue whether such temporal displacement is even theoretically possible, but for our time traveler, It's a very real, very painful prison. The challenges mount, not just external ones like avoiding detection, but internal ones: the struggle against hopelessness, the fight to maintain their sanity, the desperate clinging to the faintest flicker of hope for return. You see them wrestling with the very fabric of their being, their spirit tested to its absolute limit in a world that is not their own, a world that seems determined to consume them whole. The despair isn't a sudden storm. It's a relentless, eroding tide, slowly but surely pulling them out to sea, further and further from the shores of their own time. You pick up the journal again, your fingers tracing the faint, almost ghostly script on pages that now feel thinner, more brittle, as if the very paper itself is preparing for its own quiet vanishing act. The entries here aren't the frantic, wide-eyed observations of a newcomer, nor the desperate pleas of someone trapped. No, these are the final, slow breaths of a soul preparing for something unknown, a quiet sigh across millennia. The ink has faded further, but the words still hold a profound, weary power, pulling you into the traveler's deep, reflective state. You read as the traveler recounts the subtle shifts in their perception. The bustling forum, once a cacophony of bewildering sound and scent, now feels almost like a dream, a familiar, yet increasingly distant, tableau. The novelty has long worn off, replaced by an intimate, almost painful understanding of this ancient world. You sense the profound weight of time pressing down on them, not just the passage of days in Rome, but the crushing realization of how many centuries separate them from home. They speak of moments of profound stillness, sitting by the Tiber as the sun sets, watching the water flow, knowing that this same river has witnessed countless lives and countless empires rise and fall, long before and long after their own brief, impossible interlude. It's a feeling you can almost taste, the quiet resignation that settles over you when you know the journey is reaching its inevitable, if uncertain, end. The language in these final entries becomes less about events and more about essence. They muse on the nature of humanity itself, observing how the core emotions, love, fear, ambition, grief, remain stubbornly constant, whether draped in a toga or a tracksuit. You feel their wonder, tinged with melancholy, as they acknowledge that despite all the technological leaps and societal shifts, people are, at their heart, remarkably similar. They write, with a touch of gentle sarcasm, about how the Roman obsession with public baths and elaborate dining might not be so different from our own modern quest for the perfect spa day or the most Instagrammable meal. Truly, they muse. Some things never change. Give a human a comfortable chair, good food, and a chance to gossip, and you've pretty much summed up paradise regardless of the century. There's a deep, almost spiritual reflection on their isolation. The sheer impossibility of their secret has created an unbridgeable chasm between them and everyone they've encountered. They write about the bittersweet pain of forming genuine connections, friendships, perhaps even deeper bonds, knowing that every interaction is built on a foundation of deception. You feel the pang in their chest as they describe looking into the eyes of a Roman friend, seeing warmth and trust, while inside, their own heart aches with the knowledge of a truth that could shatter everything. It's the ultimate form of loneliness, isn't it? To be surrounded by people, yet utterly alone in your experience. The entries speak of the subtle signs of decay they now perceive, things a native Roman might take for granted or simply not notice. They observe the fraying edges of the empire, the whispers of discontent from distant provinces, the increasing reliance on military might to maintain order. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Roman Empire, despite its immense power and longevity, was constantly grappling with internal strife and external pressures, leading to its eventual fragmentation. The traveler, with the benefit of hindsight, sees the cracks forming long before they become chasms. You can almost hear the sigh in their words as they describe a grand triumphal procession, noting not just the gleaming armor and the roaring crowds, but also the weary faces of the soldiers, the faint scent of fear beneath the celebratory incense, and the subtle, almost imperceptible, shift in the emperor's demeanor, hinting at a burden too heavy to bear. There's a poignant passage where the traveler reflects on the concept of home. Is it a place, a time, or a feeling? They admit that Rome, for all its alienness, has become a strange sort of second home, a gilded cage perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. Yet, the longing for their true temporal home, for the familiar hum of electricity and the taste of a truly good cup of coffee, a lament you've seen them express before, often humorously, about the lack of decent caffeine in ancient Rome, remains a constant ache. They confess to finding beauty in the Roman world, a raw, unfiltered vitality that their own time, with all its comforts, sometimes seems to lack. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Finding beauty in a place you desperately want to leave? Like appreciating the intricate design of a spiderweb when you're stuck in it. You read a particularly insightful passage about Roman superstitions. The traveler notes how deeply ingrained omens and auguries were in daily life, from the flight of birds to the entrails of sacrificed animals. They recount a quirky tidbit about how Romans would often consult chickens for omens before important events, with the birds' eating habits supposedly dictating the success or failure of an endeavor. Imagine, the traveler writes, the fate of an entire legion resting on whether a chicken decides it's peckish enough to eat its grain. Our modern stock market feels almost rational by comparison. They marvel at the human need for meaning, for signs, for a sense of control over an unpredictable world, a need that transcends time and technology. The entries now speak openly of their dwindling hope for return. The quest, once so urgent and consuming, has morphed into a quiet acceptance. They describe the last, increasingly desperate, attempts to find a way back, each failure eroding a little more of their spirit. You feel the profound weariness in their words, the exhaustion of maintaining a lie, of constantly observing and analyzing, of being an eternal outsider. They express a profound sense of futility, acknowledging that perhaps their very presence here, their disruption of the timeline, has sealed their fate. It's a heavy thought, isn't it? That your biggest desire might be the very thing holding you captive. There's a beautiful, yet heartbreaking, passage where the traveler reflects on the nature of history itself. They ponder how much is lost, how much is misinterpreted, how much is simply forgotten over the centuries. They write about witnessing events that historians would later debate for millennia, offering a unique, first-hand perspective that can never be shared. Historians still argue whether certain emperors were truly mad or merely politically astute. They write, "But I saw the subtle tremor in his hand, the flicker in his eye, the way he picked at his fingernails when he thought no one was looking." The textbooks miss the human details, don't they? You feel a pang of regret for them, for the invaluable knowledge they possess, trapped within these pages, unable to influence the narrative of their own past. The tone shifts to one of profound gratitude, despite the hardship. They express thanks for the unparalleled privilege of witnessing history unfold, of walking among giants and ordinary people alike, of breathing the same air as emperors and slaves. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, isn't it, to find gratitude even in despair? They write about the simple joys they've come to appreciate, the warmth of the Roman sun, the taste of fresh bread, the sound of children laughing in the streets. These small moments, once overlooked in their desperate quest, now shine brightest. The traveler begins to write with a sense of finality, as if they know these are their last words. They speculate on what might become of them. Will they simply vanish? Will they live out their days in ancient Rome, an anachronism until the very end? Will their journey somehow complete its circuit, returning them to a time and place they no longer fully belong to? There's a subtle plea in their words, not for rescue, but for understanding. They hope that whoever finds this journal will grasp the magnitude of their ordeal, the sheer, mind-bending reality of their existence. You feel the weight of their unspoken questions, their unfulfilled desires. The pages become more sparse, the entries shorter, as if the energy for writing is itself draining away. The ink is lighter, the script more hurried, sometimes trailing off mid-sentence. You can almost picture them, perhaps by the flickering light of an oil lamp, their hand growing weary, their eyes heavy, pouring their last remaining thoughts onto these fragile parchments. It's a quiet farewell, a lingering goodbye to a world they never intended to inhabit, and to a chronicle they can no longer continue. The anticipation of the end isn't a scream, but a whisper, a gentle closing of a very long, very strange chapter. You hold the ancient diary, its leather cover now familiar beneath your fingertips, the faint scent of aged parchment and dust clinging to your senses. Your eyes scan the final, almost frantic scrawls, the ink smudged in places as if the writer's hand trembled or hurried. You lean closer, the soft lamp beside you casting a warm, intimate glow on the page, willing the words to cohere, to offer a final, satisfying resolution. But they don't. The narrative, which had been building with such intensity, detailing the traveler's desperate quests and profound reflections, simply stops. It's not a planned ending, not a neatly tied bow. It's an abrupt, jarring cessation, like a conversation cut short by a sudden, unseen force. One moment you're immersed in their struggle, their yearning for home, their quiet despair, and the next, the page is blank, save for a few faint, indecipherable marks that could be anything from a hurried smudge of ink to the ghost of a final, desperate thought. It's as if the very act of writing was interrupted mid-sentence, the pen perhaps falling from a suddenly lifeless hand, or vanishing along with its owner. You turn the page just in case. And then the next. Nothing. Just the pristine, untouched paper of the unused remainder of the journal. It's almost comical in its abruptness, like someone watching their favorite streaming show only for the Wi-Fi to cut out during the climactic scene. You're left hanging, suspended in the silent void of the unknown. What happened? Did they finally find a way back? A temporal door swinging open in a dusty Roman alleyway, whisking them away in a flash of light? Or did their luck, so meticulously documented in close calls, finally run out? Were they discovered, their anachronistic knowledge too blatant, their strange mannerisms too suspicious for the watchful eyes of the Praetorian Guard or an overly observant Roman citizen? Perhaps they simply succumbed to the sheer weight of their isolation, the constant strain of maintaining a lie in a world not their own. You recall their musings on despair, the mounting challenges, and you wonder if the Roman air, thick with the scent of spices and sewage, finally became too heavy to breathe. Did they simply give up? Or did some unforeseen illness, a Roman fever perhaps, claim them, leaving their incredible story unfinished, a silent scream frozen in time? It feels profoundly unfair, doesn't it? To be granted such an intimate glimpse into an impossible life, only for the curtain to drop without so much as a final bow. It's like being promised a grand dessert after a delicious meal, only to be handed an empty plate. The nature of the anomaly itself remains the greatest, most tantalizing mystery. How did they get there? Was it a conscious act, a deliberate journey through the fabric of time, or a cosmic accident, a slip through a tear in reality? The diary offers no clues, no schematics for a temporal displacement unit, no philosophical treatises on the mechanics of causality. Simply the record of a result, not the cause. You ponder the implications. If one person could fall through time, could others? Is history littered with these temporal castaways, quietly living out their days, trying desperately to blend in, perhaps subtly altering the course of events with a misplaced word or an accidental invention? Historians still argue whether certain inexplicable advancements in ancient civilizations might hint at external influences, though usually they're talking about aliens, not time tourists trying to figure out how to use Roman plumbing without looking suspicious. You trace the last visible lines on the page, a faint impression of ink, almost a ghost of a word. Was it a name? A warning? A plea? The uncertainty gnaws at you. This isn't just an unfinished story. It's an unfinished life, a profound human experience left without an epilogue. You imagine the traveler, perhaps standing on the Capitoline Hill, gazing at the sprawling city, moments before their disappearance. Did they feel a pull, a tremor in the air? Or was it sudden, absolute, a blink and you're gone kind of vanishing act? The Romans, for all their meticulous record-keeping and love of omens, certainly wouldn't have documented a person simply winking out of existence. Though, to be fair, if you suddenly vanished from your living room right now, your housemates would probably just assume you finally remembered that thing you were supposed to do. This journal, this impossible artifact, challenges everything you thought you knew about time, about history, about what's possible. It's a testament to human resilience, to the ability to adapt to the most unimaginable circumstances, but also a stark reminder of our fragility in the face of the universe's grand, unfathomable whims. You consider the countless texts lost to time, the Library of Alexandria, for instance, a devastating loss of knowledge, and wonder if this diary, too, was meant to be lost, only to resurface now, a whisper from a forbidden past. It feels almost sacrilegious to hold it, to have peered into such a private, impossible journey. The silence in your room deepens, punctuated only by the soft hum of the lamp and the distant, familiar sounds of your own time. The Roman marketplace, the clatter of chariots, the scent of garum and sweat and incense. They all fade, replaced by the mundane reality of your present. But something has shifted within you. You look at the clock, at the calendar with new eyes. You see the layers of history beneath your feet, the countless lives lived and forgotten, and now the tantalizing possibility of lives lived out of sequence. The journal lies open, a silent witness to its own enigma. It offers no answers, only more questions, like a philosophical onion with infinite, tear-inducing layers. You're left with the profound, unsettling realization that the universe is far stranger, far more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than you could ever have imagined. And the time traveler? Their fate is a secret held only by the currents of time itself, a final, poignant mystery whispered on the wind. The glow of the lamp begins to soften, the shadows in the room growing longer, gentler. You feel the weight of the diary in your hands, not just its physical presence, but the immense weight of the story it contains, a story that now, finally, rests unfinished in your mind. The bustling streets of ancient Rome, the whispered intrigues, the quiet moments of companionship, they begin to recede, like a tide pulling back from the shore, leaving only a lingering impression. Let the questions drift away now, like leaves on a slow-moving stream. There is a quiet comfort in the unknown, a gentle peace in letting go of the need for every answer. The time traveler's journey, whether it ended in triumph or quiet resignation, has found its home within your thoughts, a soft echo in the chambers of your imagination. Allow the imagery to soften, the colors to blur, the edges of the story to become indistinct, like a dream fading with the morning light. The past is a vast, quiet ocean, and you have simply dipped your toes in its mysterious depths. Now, the currents of sleep are calling you, guiding you gently towards the peaceful shores of rest. Let your breath deepen, your body relax, and your mind quiet its endless wondering. The stories of yesterday can wait until tomorrow.